Yeah, it's that time of the year when we pack up everything, including a bloody tree, and head out to where Father Christmas lives, according to the kids. Anyway, I'm in the new Isuzu MU-X. This is the top spec Onyx model. Love the name Onyx. I don't know why. It sounds cool. And yeah, I think it's a kind of car that South Africans love, and it's a car that South Africans love to take on road trips like this, you know. So yeah, it competes against the Fortuner and the Ford Everest, and obviously also the Mitsubishi Pajero Sport and the Havala H9 if you want to be comprehensive about it. But predominantly in South Africa, Toyota Fortuner, Ford Everest. And I must say, on looks alone, I think this is the most attractive. Obviously this is the top spec, so it really looks, you know, they've thrown everything at it. It's a good looking car. I like it a lot actually. And inside as well, very neat, very tidy. Nothing extravagant or extraordinarily modern or futuristic. Just crisp, clean, neat, organized. Build quality seems fantastic as well. And yeah, big step forward I think in terms of visual and sort of build and layout appeal compared with the previous MU-X, which was admittedly ancient even when it arrived in South Africa brand new, like, I don't know, 3 years ago. So yeah, I'm very pleased to have this Isuzu for the holidays. It does suit my needs perfectly. It's got a tow bar on the back as well. It's got 7 seats. It's got a lot of space. And I've done this trip under the same circumstances with both the Toyota Fortuner, twice actually, with the Toyota Fortuner, a Ford Everest, Isuzu MU-X, as well as the Isuzu MU-X spin-off, the Chevy Trailblazer. So this is my kind of genre. I know this, and a Havala H9 actually. So yeah, this is my genre. I know these cars. And I can tell you now that I understand why the Toyota Fortuner is so popular. A lot of people like to be negative about the Toyota Fortuner, particularly about its funny seating arrangement at the back, but having lived with Fortuners on various occasions for extended periods of time, I've never had a problem with that seating arrangement. So that aside, these vehicles are pretty evenly matched. You know, big capacity diesel engines, 4-cylinder engines, 2.8 in the Fortuner, 3 litre in here. Obviously 4-wheel drive, automatic, and all the bells and whistles. Isuzu is a really trusted brand in this country. They tend to do things conservatively and generally a little bit behind in terms of this, you know, the advanced tech. Probably because they are trying to make it work properly. So, which raises actually an interesting point straight off the bat. This is a new engine. It doesn't feel particularly new. Don't get me wrong. It does a job on the open road and so on. It's not particularly punchy. It still has that gruff Isuzu nature. Maybe it also means it's tough, gruff and tough, like a Isuzu generally is. But yeah, with 140 kilowatts. So it's very slightly down on power compared with a smaller capacity 2.8 litre Fortuner. It's also down on torque. This is 450 and the Fortuner is 500. So I find that quite interesting that, you know, this, I mean, the Fortuner is sort of well into its model life now, and it's a smaller capacity engine. You would think that Isuzu might come out with a bigger capacity 3 litre that punches out at least more than the 2.8 in the Toyota, but no. Anyway, we'll figure out on this trip how efficient it is, how comfortable it is to live with, I guess. I'm not going to tow anything, but I guess we are going to go full up on road trips with bags and bicycles and surfboards and all those kind of things. So it's going to get the proper South African December holiday treatment, I can assure you that. So guys, as you can probably see from the length of my beard and hopefully my suntan, it's now been about a week since the holiday started, and a week with the Isuzu MU-X. And as you do when you go to the garden route, you generally end up on a gravel road somewhere. So that's where we are now, testing the new Isuzu on some gravel. And you've probably heard the garden routes had some pretty bad weather the last few months, and so these roads are badly rutted. But like, you know, that's Isuzu territory. They've always excelled in these kind of conditions, and this MU-X is no different. I would say it's a bit firmer sprung than a Toyota Fortuner or a Ford Everest, but it's not skittish. It's very controllable, and the cabin is rock solid. There's not a rattle or a squeak. If you do hear anything, it's probably the beach toys in the boot, not the Isuzu. And that's the thing, you know, living with a car for a week, you start to learn about its pros and cons, and there are a lot of pros with this vehicle. It's very spacious. I'm 1.8 meters and I fit in the back, the third row, very easily. It's got its own ventilation outlets in the third row. Access is very easy, you just tumble the second row forward. Second row is very comfy as well. It's got its own 2 USB ports, it's got ventilation outlets, it's got its own fan speed control. So the more we live with it, the more it becomes clear that this is really a very good family car. There are, however, one or two things that where I think Isuzu missed the trick. If you look at the car's pricing, especially compared with the Fortuner that has just now been updated, they could have gone a little bit further with the infotainment. Don't get me wrong, I mean, it's got Apple CarPlay connectivity, and it's got a nice big digital touchscreen, and in front of you is a mixture of analog and digital. But if you look at, for example, what a Chinese brand like Haval can do at 600,000 Rand, and this is an 860,000 Rand vehicle, then I think I would want digital screens everywhere. I would like a far more high resolution, advanced 360-degree camera system instead of just a reverse camera. You don't get a charge pad for your smartphone in this car. It's not available. And it doesn't have a sunroof, and South Africans love sunroofs. So as a flagship vehicle at 860,000 Rand, I think it just lacks those few standout elements that would have given it an edge, for example, for somebody who's sitting on the fence, who can't decide, who isn't specifically a Toyota person or an Isuzu person or a Ford person. And then the engine, it's called the 4JJ3, and it's based very much on the trusty old 4JJ1 that did service in the D-Max and the KB for so long. Everything is new, however, except the conrods, apparently, but it still has that very gruff, sort of lazy Isuzu nature. So although it's a bigger capacity, supposedly newer engine than the 2.8 in the Toyota, it's not as powerful. It's slightly short on power. It's slightly short on torque as well. Look, it doesn't feel like it's lacking for power torque in general driving, but sort of cruising at high speeds and overtaking, I would have liked it to have a bit more punch, to be honest, especially given the fact that it is an all new vehicle. So it's time to head off-road in the Isuzu MU-X, and as I said, this is the top spec Onyx model, so that means it rides on very beautiful but very big 20-inch wheels, shot with very low profile road bias tires, which isn't ideal for rough off-roading. And there's also got sideboards, and I don't want to damage those, so we're not going to go too hectic on the off-roading, but enough to get a feel. It has selectable 4 high and 4 low range, obviously. It's also got a rear diff lock, and then it's got that gravel mode that helps you just adjust the traction control and stability control settings for gravel road driving, which really helps because the MU-X is a bit more firmly sprung than before. It can get a little bit more bumpy on corrugated roads, and that really helps keep control. But off-road, ground clearance is good. It sits somewhere between Everest and Fortuner, and I would say that, you know, in the engine's defense, if I can put it that way, because it is a little bit low down on torque compared with its rivals, it does develop its torque, or it seems geared really well for off-roading, and so it feels pretty much unstoppable. You'd really have to get into very difficult situations to have to call on the 4 low. I really wish the car had a more advanced camera system though, so that you can place the vehicle more easily. You know, us city boys are spoiled with those kind of things these days, and this only has a pretty low resolution rear view camera. Overall, however, very impressive performance off-road. I think at least as good as the competition, but then the clincher is a significantly improved on-road performance at the same time. So if you put those two together, I think it makes for an even more impressive package overall. So I've now had about 2.5 weeks of quality time with the Isuzu MU-X, and we've done roughly around 1,200 kilometers, and that included a lot of open road cruising, fully laden, often with surfboards on the roof, crawling through holiday traffic in Hartenbos, and some gravel road driving, as well as some light off-roading. And I guess it's time to come to some sort of a conclusion about this very important new model. Now, Isuzu is a very highly regarded brand in this country, with a good reason. The D-Max is a very solid, reliable bakkie. But Isuzu has not quite yet managed to crack the SUV segment, which Toyota completely dominates with the Fortuner. So I guess the big question here is the new Isuzu MU-X better, or even a better buy than a Toyota Fortuner? And that's quite a tricky one to answer, especially when you talk about this specific model, this Onyx, because at 860,000 Rand, the Onyx spec MU-X is more expensive than your top spec Fortuner. So my gut feeling is, looking at the specs, that the best value in the MU-X lineup actually lies at a lower spec level. But let's talk about the MU-X in general, because most of what makes the MU-X, in my opinion, the new segment leader, would apply to all the MU-Xs. Firstly, its suspension setup is contributes to making it a far better on-road vehicle without compromising it as an off-road vehicle or a gravel road vehicle. So, you know, bakkie-based SUVs often get a lot of flack for being very clumsy with a lot of body roll on normal roads where they are driven most of the time. And this Isuzu is significantly improved in those respects without you know, a negative impact on its off-road ability, barring perhaps slightly skittish performance on corrugated roads at speed. So there's that aspect. Then in terms of the engine, initially I thought it was a bit weird and disappointing that it lacked the power and the torque of its older rivals, but I think in general driving it's not something that you really miss. So I would say it's on par there, but it does have the best towing capacity at 3.5 tons in this category, or at least compared with the Everest and the Fortuner. So if you're going to be towing, this will be a good choice. In terms of efficiency, I would say it is a little bit early to tell for me because of the nature of the kind of driving that I've been doing. You know, with the surfboards on the roof and fully laden and so on, and the car still being quite new, I should be achieving, based on Isuzu's claimed figure of, I think, 7.6. That usually translates to around a real world figure of around 9.2, let's say. But I'm getting closer to 10. And that's disappointing on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's also similar to what I was averaging with the competition. So, not a negative in that regard. In terms of its interior, it's got the most interior space, I think. If you take it in terms of occupant space as well as luggage space, once you put the seats down, it's massive in the back there. And it's also very easy in terms of access and folding seats down and all those kind of things. Then moving to the front of the car, if you look at the infotainment system, it's probably the area where I'm a little bit disappointed in this Onyx level MU-X, because although it's got Apple CarPlay and Android Auto connectivity, and it's got a rear view camera and so on, and a really crisp, nice, big digital screen, it's really quite simple overall. It lacks a advanced 360-degree camera system, which I think, you know, it would have been. It's a feature that you increasingly see in even cheaper vehicles, and it would actually help this vehicle in terms of you know, this off-road comfort. And then even the resolution of the camera that it does have is not particularly good. So lacks a sunroof as well, lacks the charging pad for your smartphone. So at flagship level, I just think it falls a little bit short on the kind of spec that you would want. And for that reason, I'm saying look very closely at buying an MU-X if you're looking at a 7-seat bakkie-based SUV, but potentially consider a lower specification level and a lower price level than this Onyx, which, as I say that, I must also add that I've really enjoyed. Now keep in mind, there's a new Everest due next year, and that the current Fortuner is also of, let's say, well, you know, after halfway through its model life. So this comes in at a time when the rivals are kind of weakening because they are getting towards the end of their model life. It feels like a new breed of bakkie-based SUV, and it's mostly due to it being, I think, set up more for on-road use than you know, the kind of really rough off-road use that you would expect the D-Max is set up for. So it's a little bit firmer all around, and that has implications on an off-road. So on-road, you get a car, or at least a SUV, that is significantly more stable at higher speeds. It doesn't have massive body roll like its predecessor and the Trailblazer that was based on it, and the Fortune and the Everest that it currently competes with. So, and you combine that with its very advanced safety features, lane keep assist, rear traffic alert, even an attention monitor. This is a really advanced car, and it's set up for on-road driving really well. So in conclusion, I think I would give this Isuzu MU-X Onyx specifically a very solid 7.5 out of 10. Thanks for watching. So my colleague, friend, Pajero Sienna recently raised some interesting points around eating while on the road, particularly the challenge of the garage pie. Because you do tend to look like a giant had dandruff in your car after eating a pie in your car. So may I recommend an alternative, the trusty Samoosa. I think it's a very good alternative to a pie. It's a lot less likely to leave flakes all over the place. It's filling if it's a big one like this. Maybe it's just the Cape Malay blood in me that's talking, but I actually prefer it to a pie. Problem is, once you get going with one, you just want more and more and more. Some consumer advice: Samoosas over garage pies.